Hi, I'm Gervais. In this video we're going to be looking back at Doom 3 and its two expansions. Critically speaking, Doom 3 isn't regarded very well, but I think pretty highly of it, and a number of other people do as well, and there's a lot of good reasons for doing so. I'm going to be going into detail about it. Let's get started with it. Doom the First is iconic, instantly recognizable, and defined an entire generation of shooter design. Doom 3 doesn't really do any of those things, but it is still a great horror shooter, a technological marvel for the time, and the game that I feel totally completes the transition between the kind of labyrinthine, fast-action shooters that the original Doom popularized back in 1993, and the continuous level story-driven shooter design that began replacing them after the success of Half-Life in 1998. It is a totally different kind of shooter than the original Dooms. It has totally different priorities and interests, and it caters to the taste of a very different gaming market than the one that it began to dominate with Doom 1. Many have pulled apart the original Doom, from Tony Kushner's book, Masters of Doom, which looks at the game from a biographical angle and through the influence of the personalities behind the game, all the way through this year's XBoxAhoy Retrospective, which comprehensively places the early games in a historical perspective. Doom 3, though? Most retrospectives of the game I've read see it as coming up short, dull, derivative, confused. I've never found any of those things to be completely true about the game. There's a mix of humor and blood, as well as a blend of design values from both 1993 and 2004 that's really unique to the game. Doom 3 is a genuinely, lovingly crafted game. Real passion went into it, along with some quirky ideas that didn't pan out, and many more forward-looking design choices that did. It's key to appreciate how heavy-duty the graphics race was back in the early 2000s. id and Epic Games, who created the Unreal series, often had titles in direct head-to-head competition in terms of design and intent, ever since Unreal Tournament went up against Quake 3. 2003's Unreal 2 and then Unreal Tournament 2004 were huge leaps forward in 3D graphics. They were really pulling ahead of id in that department, it seemed. Then I remember reading PC Gamer back when they did their big Doom 3 preview, looking at the screenshots and thinking to myself, this doesn't really seem possible. Unreal 2 had many fancy tricks up its sleeves from a technical standpoint, but it had huge outdoor areas, and its focus was on looking good and running well across these larger distances and sprawling levels. It was great 3D for the time, but it seemed in keeping with the still cartoonish look of many 3D shooters of the era. Doom 3 was completely different. The levels are much smaller, more claustrophobic, almost exclusively indoor. But they didn't look cartoonish. In 2004, they felt just a half step away from realistic. Half-Life 2, released a couple months later, would also push the frontiers of graphics for the time, but its emphasis was on textures, light, and distance. Doom 3 is all about shadow and architecture. I remember one particular screenshot in the PC Gamer preview, showing the new version of the big demon fella in a blood-stained bathroom. The new art style was so sharp and so moody, and the shadows were unbelievably vivid. The oppressive lighting was so pitch-perfect for the half-serious horror tone Doom 3 was taking, I couldn't even believe it. I was completely taken aback. It was a genuine leap forward in graphics, and a big fat one at that. Every part of Doom 3 is oriented around the capabilities of id Tech 4, the engine behind the game. The tone, the level design, the art style, the pace of combat. It's too coherent and well-crafted a game to call Doom 3 a tech demo. That's incredibly reductive. But make no mistake, Doom 3 is a game that's fundamentally about the id Tech 4 engine first, with Martian demons coming in second. I think it's also fair to say that Doom 3 is a predictable result of a Doom without John Romero. Masters of Doom, Kushner's id Studio biography, is pretty much structured around the dueling personalities of John Romero and John Carmack. It highlights the first Doom as the zenith of their collaborations, with Carmack, the tech pioneer, creating an engine that blew its contemporaries out of the water, and Romero, the player, crafting the frenetic, compulsive pacing of the gameplay and the maze-like, hypnotic layout of the levels. Design and technology, the two denominations of game development. A recent Errant Signal video called into question the value of biographical readings of games. We don't truly know the people behind the games. The impressions we get of them through the games are so limited that it follows that it's worthwhile to be skeptical of making assumptions and assertions based on the supposed personality of a designer. He used his own video on the original Doom as an example, where he talks about how the original Doom feels like a game that's totally illustrative of Romero and Carmack's personalities, made manifest in the design of the game. It's the positioner that Tony Kushner takes as well, of course, but I found Errant Signal's reversal on that critical interpretation really compelling. Maybe you really can't put faith in a designer's cult of personality. At the same time,
Doom 3 is almost exactly what you'd expect a Doom game with all Carmack and no Romero to look like if you're a fan of how Kushner characterizes the two. Instead of design and technology and vibrant agreement, the former is subservient to the latter. I think the singular reason that Doom 3 is a slower, moody horror shooter and not a frenetic, fast-paced gun labyrinth is that if you're blowing through the levels as fast as the original Doom, you will never stop to appreciate the unified shadow and lighting system, the rendering technique that makes those two things so groundbreakingly vivid in this game. A slow horror shooter that hides a handful of powerful enemies in the shadows literally requires you to slow down and engage directly with the game's lighting systems. If you speedrun it like the original Doom, you'll get jammed up by puzzles, ambushes, scripted encounters. Every last one of those mechanics requires you to interact with some new feature of id Tech 4 that Carmack is trying to show off. The thing is, this is also a Doom game and has to have Doom-like things in it. It can't be 100% new, so while its principal design is slow-paced, story-driven horror shooter, it has moments where it becomes a gun labyrinth again, or moments where it hides monsters behind hidden panels to jump out at you, or the fact that it has power-ups and health packs scattered all over the shelves and all over the ground. It is still recognizably Doom. But the parts of it that are nostalgic for the original Doom frequently come into tension with the horror show come lighting exhibition elements of the design. You don't see this better than the dilemma over the game's flashlight. In this video, I'm playing the 2012 HD re-release of the game, the BFG edition. In this version, you hit the flashlight and you get a cone of light at the end of your weapon. That's how it is in most other games too, but in the original version you had to lower your weapon and take out a real actual flashlight. You could bonk a zombie on the head with it ineffectually, but you were essentially defenseless anytime you wanted to really see where you were going. Since you were getting ambushed in pretty much every single hallway in Doom 3, this caused some frustration with many players. I'm pretty sure I complained about it at the time as well. Here's the thing though. Having the flashlight beam so readily and easily available in the BFG edition had me using it way more often than I did when I played the original version. And about a third of the way through the game, using it all the time, I realized something. I was ruining the game's atmosphere almost completely. The flashlight is a pain in the ass to use in regular Doom 3 for two reasons. The first is obviously to build tension, to make you vulnerable in exchange for a better idea of where you're going. The second is to discourage you from using it at all, to rely on the subtle indications in the native lighting that tell you where an ambush is coming from, to see the demons as shapes and movement and fire in the shadows, to pay closer attention to your environment. Where I live in Seattle, there's a science fiction museum, and they've got a horror exhibit going on. A lot of what all the directors featured in the exhibit stress is the importance of getting your lighting and shadows framed in the shot just right for successful horror. The meme is absolutely true that sometimes the murky darkness of Doom 3 is really obnoxious, but the specific horror shots that the game sets up that transcend the cheesy darkness of the more boring hallways also depend on you having the damn flashlight turned off to appreciate. The use of light and shadow in Doom 3 is excruciatingly meticulous. id Tech 4's unified lighting and shadows was truly unique from what any other developer was using at the time. This was id's opportunity to really show what it could do. The execution isn't uniformly charismatic, but it is wholly planned out, with an uncommon amount of care. That's part of what I think people respect about id games, and what might lead to the kind of cult of personality that id folks have. Their games always feel handcrafted, a AAA experience with an obvious personal touch. Doom 3 is a winkingly self-conscious sci-fi B-movie at heart. It redoes the original story. Demons attack a colony on Mars after a teleportation experiment dials directly to hell. The original game had you going through one base, a second base, and then hell itself. Doom 3 sets itself up to do much the same thing, but with the combat rhythms of shooters from the Half-Life tradition. The level design falls squarely between Doom, with its discrete levels tied loosely together, and Half-Life, which has you going on one linear, unbroken journey through the environment. Doom 3 is a linear game presented as a continuous experience, but it still makes its level transitions deliberate and obvious, each level retaining the feeling of being a singular, separate experience from the last. Some elements of the original game get ditched completely, most interestingly, the use key. One thing id was pretty adamant about regarding Doom 3 is that a dedicated action button was anachronistic. If you wanted to immerse the player, really immerse them, let them reach out and interact with the in-game electronics themselves. Doom 3, Quake 4, and Prey all make heavy use of these interactive panels in the id Tech 4 engine. Get close enough, your weapon disappears and a cursor comes up, allowing you to use the panel in a way that's natural to the scene and in real time, leaving you vulnerable to attack from behind. It really is effortless and intuitive, but what's crazy is how many detailed panels there are just scattered around as background decoration. While it means nothing and does nothing, you can back up files on computers across half the face of Mars. I think that's the key to the tone balance in the game. It's very aware that it is a video game and not a movie, and so is willing to do very unrealistic, unnatural things with the level architecture, like all the hidden monster panels. It's also committed to the visual language of horror movies and strives for an impression of realism on a frame-by-frame basis, despite the artificiality of the scares, and so crams the game from floor to ceiling with compelling background detail. To be honest, the monster closets aren't frightening. It's the rhythm of combat that builds the tension. If you enter a room and aren't immediately attacked, they'll spawn momentarily. It's predictable. But with all the darkness and the shadow, it is unpredictable what particular direction they'll come from. That they will appear, though, that's guaranteed. The horror is not so much the fear and uncertainty of hunter versus hunted, but the pressure and the paranoia of being under relentless assault by the infinite hordes of hell itself. Not taking the plot seriously while still taking the genre seriously is immediately evident in the game's opening levels. In a most un-Doom-like turn of events, you begin with 2 whole levels free of combat. Your still anonymous Marine, the Doom Guy, arrives on Mars, goes through screening, checks in at the front desk, watches the news, plays an arcade game, has conversations where everyone drops cryptic bits of foreshadowing, receives his mission from the base commander, and eventually crosses the surface of Mars before finding the scientist he's looking for. Then the big catastrophe, and then the start of combat. You hear the screams of the folks that you just met as demonic possession runs rampant and the base is painted red with blood. It's a great sequence. Derivative, maybe. Maybe a lot. But that's the idea of B-horror. The audience is already anticipating where the movie is going, and the fun is in seeing how the director chooses to get there. Players weren't wholly expecting this new cinematic direction, though, nor were they universally comfortable with it. It was not the rhythm of the original Doom at all, not in the feel of the weapons, not in the amounts and distribution of the enemies, not in the inclusion of brief, simple puzzles that require you to take a break from combat, and certainly not in the dozens on dozens of lengthy audio logs, which give incidental background detail and frequently contain the codes to valuable storage cabinets. Since you want the items in the cabinet, you listen to the log, and you get an atmospheric ramble whether you like it or not. Mostly, I like it. A lot of the logs are used to add a bit of a human touch to the more nonsensical design choices, like carrying over the chainsaw from Doom 1 and 2. You read a series of emails about how stupid and ridiculous it is that so many chainsaws would be accidentally shipped to Mars, but whoops, so there you go. It doesn't make the presence of the chainsaw less silly, but it does acknowledge the ridiculousness, and I think that is kind of charming. The darkness and claustrophobia of the base was getting everybody down long before the demons even showed up. Mars is a shitty, shitty place to live, and then everybody gets eaten. It's like a dead-end job nightmare. Most elements of plot and character are deliberately ridiculous. Malcolm Betruger, the bad guy, is a spectacular ham. His whole character seems to be, get us as close to Hannibal Lecter as you can without paying anyone famous or violating copyright. But the guy they did get to do the maniacal, evil laugh is pretty good at it. The facial animations are graphically the worst part of the game by a huge margin. Everyone looks like a rubber mask stretched over a mannequin. So instead of trying to take these characters seriously, they all just chew the scenery extra hard to distract from the fact that their faces are so damn rubbery. And it works. The characters are memorable, if only for the fact that they are drawn broader than the side of a barn. Then there's the part where you go to hell. I really loved the way Doom 3 did its hell, with surreal and angry fantasy architecture sprouting out of the rock in haphazard clumps, things flickering past you in the darkness, the consistent feeling of being somewhere you were never meant to be. Hell's a really beautiful piece of level design, structurally and artistically. It uses many of the old Doom tricks, like presenting an obvious weapon upgrade followed by a heavy ambush or incorporating mazes, but it feels so vibrant, so contemporary. They feel like they belong there. Since any kind of baseline of normalcy is out the window for Hell, the blend of level design values from 1993 and those from 2004 stop coming into so much conflict. They flow together much better when freed from trying to create an impression of a place where human beings might actually live and work. Hell only lasts one level, but when you get back, it follows you. The bizarre and creepy landscape of Hell bleeds through and starts to consume major parts of the base, like the Shores of Hell episode in the original Doom. In fact, it's hardly the only direct reinterpretation of a moment from the original Doom. Right before going to Hell, you open the portal at the bottom of the Delta Labs, which ends up being a direct reference to the Phobos anomaly, E1M8 from the first game. 2 Hell Knights emerge, and then you fight them at once as the climactic boss experience. And then, of course, the final boss is the outrageously mighty Cyber Demon. It's a different kind of fight from E2M8, where you fight him in the first game, but it's a fantastic climactic boss battle. You've got to use the Soul Cube, a weapon made from the souls of the ancient Martians who fought the demons millennia before the Doom guy, to kill the big Cyber Demon. But you've got to recharge the cube by killing all the smaller demons literally crawling up out of the mouth of hell. Rhythmically, it's a fun fight, and it looks great. The route to get to the boss fight, all brick hallways and flickering candles, is surprisingly good at building apprehension and amping the player up for it. I honestly wish Doom 3 had stuck closer to the artistic sequence of the first game, which has the whole back third taking place in Hell. The art style for the whole franchise, fleshy, powerful demons like a medieval nightmare jammed together with industrial sci-fi, is hugely engaging. Always has been. It just hits the right nerves from a pop culture standpoint, yielding something greater than the two halves. Doom 3 is best when it's taking id Tech 4, the powerhouse technology behind the game, and using it to showcase the art style that makes Doom instantly recognizable. Doom 1 was one of the very first first-person shooters to be technically capable of gradient lighting. Visually, much of what made Doom 1 a success, the art, the tone, the lighting and shadow, made Doom 3 a success as well. But the gameplay was not the Doom that people remembered, and as such, people tend to forget about Doom 3. That doesn't mean the game wasn't incredibly influential, though. It might not have defined the gameplay rhythm of a generation of shooters, but it surely defined how a generation of slower first-person shooter titles would light their hallways. Now, that's a less exciting legacy, for sure. But almost 12 years on from Doom 3, you don't have to look hard to notice that it is an enduring legacy. There's 2 expansion campaigns for Doom 3, the 2005 Nerve follow-up called Resurrection of Evil, and a smaller campaign made just for the 2012 BFG edition called The Lost Mission. Resurrection of Evil is a weird one. It's pretty much the exact same sequence of events as the original game, but reversed and condensed, with gimmicks, lots of gimmicks, and an whatever attitude towards the horror elements of the base campaign. It's clear from the get-go, Resurrection of Evil is a classic, straight-to-DVD sequel in terms of presentation. It's pretty close to the Hills Have Eyes remakes. The first one is willfully gross and cheesy, but gets what made the original movie work and builds off those themes in a modern way pretty likably. Then The Hills Have Eyes 2. I mean, has anyone watched that fucking movie? It is absolutely trying to deliver more of the same, but without any understanding of how to control mood or write dialogue. Doom 3 was never a horror masterpiece, but it was a particularly cohesive reframing of a lot of classic horror tropes in a way that was, for 2004, really forward-looking. Resurrection of Evil suffers from also having to compete with Half-Life 2. So there's a lot of struggle for brand identity. The expansion is a lot more nostalgic for the presentation of the first game, Doom 1 from 1993, so it doubles down on things like boss fights and monster arenas. It also uses PDAs much more like keycards in the original game than using them primarily for atmosphere like in Doom 3. There's a few audio logs, but they sound half-hearted and suffer from the common horror sequel problem of characters declaring, "I can't believe something like this could happen again!" I think the idea is that Doom is known as a demon-killing series, and that combat should always be more important than atmosphere to a Doom game. The job that Doom 3 set out to do, which was to showcase the capabilities of id Tech 4, was done. Then Half-Life 2 comes along, and it's just as innovative as in the graphics department, with a much, much more natural presentation of story and plot, even with its own forays into horror with a Ravenholm segment. So I think when Nerve was doing Resurrection of Evil, there was an understanding that competing on the basis of story presentation was a rigged game, so they would compete mechanically instead. The rivalry is obvious since they give you a Doom 3 version of the gravity gun in the first 10 minutes. They call it the Grabber, but it is exactly the same thing with a more Doom-appropriate look. Then they give you the ability to slow down time with your funky heart artifact, and that's pretty cool as well. But the game's 3 primary boss fights are all centered around one gimmick or another, and it's also obnoxiously obvious. Resurrection of Evil tries too hard with the design gimmicks, and then shrugs and gives up on the horror design elements that made Doom 3 engaging despite its occasional awkward mashup of tonal priorities. That being said, there are some standout moments in Resurrection of Evil. The level design is more about finding keycards than creating atmosphere, but if you wanted a Doom 3 experience that feels closer to the original Dooms, well, here you go. The linchpin of that old-school feeling is the reintroduction of the double-barreled shotgun. It's probably Doom 2's most iconic weapon, and I love its implementation in the expansion. The amount of space you have in the corridors is pretty much perfect for closing in and one-shotting the majority of demons and zombies in the game. The expansion features more open areas than the original campaign, and I think that's deliberately on account of making sure that the double barrel isn't absolutely always the right solution for a given combat encounter. But man, is it fun. And since this campaign is more compact than the original, you get pretty much the whole upper range of the Doom 3 arsenal early on. Resurrection of Evil is all about the gameplay, the combat rhythm, and it's only courteous then that they give you all the options for combat sooner rather than later. The new enemies are an interesting mix, too. There's a new version of the Lost Soul that's actually the old Doom 2 version of the Lost Soul. And there's a new version of the Imp that moves in a more interesting way, but it's otherwise indistinguishable. Then there's this gigantic, lumbering demon with a television for a mouth and two rapid-fire, incredibly destructive cannons for arms. That thing is fantastic monster design. There's something about it that's seriously creepy and off-putting, and it's menacing both artistically and mechanically. It looks like something from classic Doom and fits right into the menagerie. There are also moments where the game actually does live up to Doom 3's standards for atmosphere, one of which is totally absent in the BFG edition. About two-thirds through the expansion, you have to travel through waste tunnels wearing a hazmat suit with a thick faceplate. It's got a flashlight built into it. That cone of light and foggy lens made the whole sequence feel fantastically menacing and dangerous, and it was one of the few times that the expansion created a powerful mood. I guess the hazmat suit was just too much hassle to incorporate into the re-release, though, because it is flat out gone in the 2012 BFG edition. Other players and reviewers have noted the same thing. It's not a bug, it's just gone. It's a major frustration. Playing through those corridors without the suit was boring, a sewer trudge. It's a real knife's edge that Doom 3 walks between being predictably banal and being genuinely atmospheric, and it highlights the craftsmanship of the main game when you consider how much more consistent the feel of the main campaign was compared to Resurrection of Evil. The other sequence that's really well done in terms of mood is the return to the Delta Labs. It doesn't last long, it's pretty much just the lead into the climax, but it is very good. Usually I find return to the scene of the crime levels kinda tedious, but sometimes, like in Dead Space 2 and here, they really work out. They need some kind of fundamental change to work, though. In Resurrection of Evil, the change is that the Delta Labs have slipped over into hell itself. If you look out the window, there are lakes of fire and floating spires of rock. The feel of it is a lot more consistent with the Deimos Labs from the first game than most of what's in Doom 3. It really is a tight, interesting riff on the original Delta Labs level design, and the new desiccated version of the zombie is very unnerving. It was the high point of the expansion for me, but I also very much enjoyed the new Hell levels. Doom 3's Hell was one that blended old-school level design with new-school combat pacing, with the tense explorative elements that made the id Tech 4 engine work so well. Resurrection of Evil just conceptualizes Hell as the place where all the monsters come from, and gives you a lengthy, difficult journey through a labyrinth of fire and blood. It feels more like the Inferno episode of Doom 1 done using the Doom 3 texture palette in terms of challenge, layout, and artistic direction. It's not meant to be frightening. Doom's Hell, the original Doom, is all about unsettling art direction with a thematic emphasis on being hopelessly outnumbered and lost. That mechanical difficulty is reflected in the hostile, bizarre environment. The Hell in Resurrection of Evil can't escape the fact that Doom 3, in its base mechanics, was designed to be played at a slower, more careful and deliberate pace than the originals. So even if it's trying to imitate Inferno, it'll never really get there. The thrill of Inferno is in the speed of movement and the momentum of combat through a maddeningly twisted and dangerous world. The Doom 3 expansion lacks the agreement between technology and design that made the previous campaigns work. What the expansion is trying to do, to feel like Doom 1, is in constant conflict with the combat pace of Doom 3. The climactic boss fight isn't much of a much either, obviously made with a greater budget restraint than the one in the main campaign, but it is a bad boss arena on top of it. No real cover from the dragon that Betrugers become while in Hell, and a limited circle of space to dodge. It's not a battle arena so much as a battle cul-de-sac. It's a tedious fight, and tedious is a bad note to go out on for a lower budget expansion pack to a horror game. It makes it harder to hold up the moments where the game was genuinely creative and enjoyable. Plus, the finale is an abrupt ball of cheese. But Truger looks like he's going to win, despite you sinking hundreds of chain gun shells and dozens of rockets into him. Then, just when all seems lost, you jam the artifact down his throat and blow him right the fuck up. Then Dr. McNeil's voice says, "Welcome home," along with a fade to black. You won, so happy ending or something, right? It's dumb. The climax is tedious, and then the climax is dumb. This is why people don't tend to discuss Resurrection of Evil with much fondness.
Maureen?
People don't tend to discuss the Lost Mission at all, so there is that. This is a bonus campaign, an 8-level sequence of what amounts to Doom 3's greatest hits of ambush scares and industrial mazes. It's exclusive to the 2012 BFG edition, one of the selling points of that product. It's a little like Blue Shift for Half-Life, actually, packaging an HD update along with a new, shorter, more tangential side campaign. Lost Mission is a pretty interesting way to cap off Doom 3, though, in that although it's the newest content created for the game by a huge margin, it feels the most dated. Doom 3's main campaign still feels relatively contemporary and fresh. Lost Mission, comparatively, is as stale as crackers in the backseat. Other YouTube folks have made side-by-side comparisons showing Lost Mission lifting entire sections right out of other levels, giving them a new coat of paint and crossing their fingers that you breeze by too quickly to notice. Chances are, though, that you will breeze by them. Lost Mission continues the trend started by Resurrection of Evil and tries to recreate the more frenetic rhythms of previous games, Doom 1 and 2. Lost Mission hits a lot closer to the mark than the expansion pack did, though. It totally abandons the horror and PDA audio log elements, although it still uses PDAs as keycards. It ditches the idea of ambush, pretty much. You are always under attack, and under so much attack from so many different directions, that you have to constantly keep moving. Run and gun through hordes of demons in a minimum plot maze of steel and blood. That's Doom. The iconic Doom experience that people still think of when they hear Doom. The legacy that so overshadowed the third game that nobody really talks about the third game anymore. I've seen people referring to Lost Mission as an admission that id made a mistake with the slow-paced, story-driven horror approach, that it's a last-ditch course correction back to the franchise roots. I think that's only half true. Lost Mission is absolutely designed for players who felt like Doom 3's direction was a misstep. But the thing is that Lost Mission is just not that engaging. It's great to run and gun in a Doom 3 environment specifically designed for that purpose, a good old-fashioned blood funnel. And Lost Mission is a lot more generous with light bulbs, too, giving the player a chance to really see the enemies and their animations without so many obscuring shadows, and I enjoyed that too. The creature design and their fluid animations are a lot of what really works about Doom 3, particularly how they interacted with the light and shadow. You fight pretty much the whole menagerie over the quick campaign of Lost Mission, and get to fight them in the most outrageous combat encounters of the whole set. 4 Hell Knights at once, with backup revenants? I mean, shit. So, what's so boring about Lost Mission? Simply put, because it's got no enthusiasm for the technology behind the game. Lost Mission is an exercise in brand recognition, and in that, it does alright. But it came out 8 years and around as many id titles after the original. id Tech 4 just is not revolutionary in any way anymore. The BFG edition even snags parts of the id Tech 5 engine for its HD facelift, staples them on top. It takes the technology entirely for granted, which is fine. After Doom 3, while 3D graphics have been getting better and better, the gaming community has seldom seen the kind of massive stride forward in both graphical power and presentation that it saw in 2004 with Doom 3 and Half-Life 2. Doom 3 no longer provokes excitement just with its unified shadows and lighting, with normal mapping. Normal mapping is just plain normal now. So all that's left to get hyped about is Doom 3's art assets and combat system. Lost Mission is happy to use the art assets, but the combat system? Try as they might to convert Doom 3 from corridor crawl to a run and gun, and they try very, very hard. It is still an awkward attempt. The main campaign absolutely, positively relies on love of the game engine and enthusiasm for its features to inform the way the player interacts with the game to work. If you stop using the former to inform the latter, the result is going to be mediocre and forgettable. Let's be fair, though. That's the standard take on Doom 3 these days. Mediocre and forgettable. You play the 1993 original here in 2016, and it feels vivid and ancient. Its ideas still hold up. Its balance is so strong as to weather more than 20 years of shifting game design priorities. Game design has moved past Doom 1's core values for the most part. It still hasn't moved past Doom 3's. That's part of why the game has not really aged so well. It's a transitional work between old-school shooters and the new school, but the new school hasn't yielded a true successor to itself yet, perhaps, unless you count open-world action titles. Games have been refining the lessons of titles like Doom 3 for years. Developers are flat-out better at them now. So it's not immediately obvious why or even if the game is a big deal unless you engage directly with its real strength, true enthusiasm of design. Lost Mission is indeed an apologetic step backwards towards nostalgia for the 90s titles. It's a step backward that highlights what a strong, bold move it was for Carmack and id to eschew nostalgia when they created Doom 3 in the first place. It is a remake of the first, truly remade into something different, something wholly geared towards showing off their technical accomplishments. We don't have much like Doom 1 on the market anymore. We've got 1,000 games like Doom 3. We're up through the id Tech 6 engine now. Perhaps the highest compliment that you can give Doom 3 is that nostalgia for it is almost unnecessary. To find something similar, all you have to do is shop. It's only the Lost Mission that feels dated, and even then, that's on account of Lost Mission fully rejecting the gameplay rhythms of the base game. Doom 4, or Doom 2016 depending on who you ask, seems to be built from the ground up to recapture the nostalgia of the original Doom. Doom 3 never cared so much for the past. It cared about a future, in which shadows and light could be rendered beautifully and in tandem, a future which we have all been enjoying for quite some time. Thanks for watching.
I'd like to also thank a number of the people who are donating to me on Patreon. Patreon makes these videos possible, or more specifically, these people make this video possible through Patreon. There's more people than just these, but these are the $10 and over a month folks, and they get thanked by name. People like Cassie, Christian Zachariason, Soeb Sheik, Pat Hay, Maxwell Reed, Dennis Clark, Jake Brennan, Kevin DeBolt, Niles D. McDonald, Igor Babik, Kumarin Rajayan, Justin Hughes, Dean Harnan, Jared Meyer, Ivan Marinov, Brad Carr, Colin, Lars Ingvar Anderson, Brett Galmo, Martin Karsten, Noah Duggins, B. Tree, Aaron Albach, Wesley M., Philip Matheron, I Cannot Fly, Alexander Leister, Michael Atwell, Boris Nielsen, David Fry, Cameron Jackson, Warren, Paul Cocker, Todd Martin, Stephen Patyuk, Sasha Aya, Jake Mays, Yuri Petnis, Carl Gleason, Alexander Heavens, Matthew, Rob Clark, Dylan Sibley, Tim Marsh, Devin Fitzpatrick, White Zero, Matthew Zender, Andreas Larson, Irvin, Stephen Preppel, Joshua Vivi, Harley McAvoy, Oliver Handlikin, Joe Wolf, Kimmo Heikkinen, Chris Larkey, Jeffrey Knutson, Stephen Lark, Sigmund Copperwood, Preston Allen, Nathan Campbell, Tyzer Vicarian, Joe Hewison, Angel-Headed Hipster, Cameron, Aiden AK-47, Comfy Hat, Ron Gervais, Balder Carlson, Nick Cole Hamilton, Dalton Seiler, Ken Young, Nobody, Andrew Steele, Martin Scanning, Galak, David Reed, D, David Gilbreth, Josh, Sil Sangustin, Amir Aguilar, Ryan Gunst, Brad Wallace, Connor Biblo, Spyro Sedaris, Niels Bach-Frummer, Annax of Rhodes, Dewey, and Josh Farks. Thanks again for watching.